This podcast is brought to you by Ignition from Inductive Automation, and this is Gary Mintchell here for another episode of my infrequent podcast, which I try to do regularly and just can't get the thoughts to it. Interestingly enough, I was at the ICC 2016, the Ignition Customer Conference put on by Inductive Automation. I went last year for the first time, and I think it was their second. And so I think this was number 3. They hold it at they're based in the Sacramento, California area, and they hold it in Harris Convention Center, very close to their offices in Folsom, California. And they sold out. It's a relatively small venue. Mostly it's a venue for performing arts. But, I mean, it works for them quite well. But it holds about 430 people, and they had 430 plus attendees. And I was honored to be asked to lead you might call it a roundtable discussion. They called it a meetup on manufacturing. And I was asking some questions about technology. If you don't know Inductive Automation, they started out as an HMI SCADA supplier, competitive to Wonderware, Involution, and Rockwell Automation, HMI SCADA software, that part of Rockwell software. At any rate, they came in with a couple of interesting things. They wrote the platform in Java, and they basically use Java and Python right now for most of their stuff. They did backslide a little bit, and they did have some .NET implementations, but mostly they've ported to Java and so on. And they started out as HMI SCADA and pretty much just competitive. One thing is using Java and then IT-friendly technologies. So linking with SQL, natively into SQL or SQL, however, whichever one you use, databases, using IT-friendly other technologies from the beginning 13 years ago. And so kind of interesting things, but if it was only technology, who would actually care? But it's the business model which was most interesting. They turned licensing on its head. They could take what you might spend $100,000 on one of the other 3, 4, buy for $10,000. Now, obviously, they make money. They have a business model based on making money at that level of sales, and customers do spend money. I mean, obviously, well, some people, but you shouldn't expect something for nothing. But you are getting a really good value for the dollar, and basically it's because you're paying for what you get or you're paying for what you use. Really, really interesting model, which I've seen one of the competitors trying to transition over to, and there's promise that next week, the first week of October, at the Wonderware Customer Conference, that they're teasing us with some announcements coming that will be very future-looking. So I'll wait for next week, and we'll talk about Wonderware. So this week, Ignition. Can't tell you an awful lot about the guts of the software other than they've transitioned to more of a platform with modules you can add on. Not only, well, actually, literally Inductive Automation has modules for various types of industrial software you might need. And they market basically through systems integrators or online. And integrators or you, the customer, can actually write a module, some sort of a custom thing for, say you're in pharma or food and beverage and you needed some little thing, and so you do it and you wrote it. Well, you can actually put it in their store and sell it and that sort of thing. The really forefront of some of these new technologies and new ways to do business in industrial software. So a lot of cool things going on, and the company is growing. It's had double-digit growth since it started 13 years ago, year by year. It has not, well, let's put it this way, positively, it has always had a profitable quarter ever since 2010, the release of Ignition. So it's profitable. It's really only owned by a couple literally a couple, husband and wife family owns it. No outside investment, no borrowing. Built it, just bootstrapped it up, and just leveraged its own internal resources. A really good way to go into business. Speaking from someone who has tried all kinds of different ways of going into business, and most of which didn't really work out that well. So more power to them. All that well and good. To me, the interesting parts, and to a sizable number of people who came to the sessions, was this little byplay between two technologies that move data from somewhere, the Internet of Things, if you will, or some sort of devices or automation or whatever, move data from there to Ignition, their platform. And from Ignition, then it can go to a lot of other places, for instance, ERPs and MESs and so on. By the way, they have an MES too, but we won't go there right now. So the two technologies that were in play were MQTT and OPC UA. And Arlen Nipper, CTO, co-inventor, if you will, of MQTT, and president of Cirrus Link company, a company that has based its whole business model on selling tools and libraries and so on for MQTT developers. And then Tom Burke was there, the executive director and president of OPC Foundation, speaking on OPC UA. And it was sort of set up, not intentionally by Inductive, and not really intentionally by Tom, but as kind of a little match, a little competition between the two. Weird, because OPC UA, so MQTT is really a transport. It's a very lightweight transport built for cellular and telephony communication way back when it just couldn't, think 300 baud modems. Remember those words? And that sort of stuff way back when. And you needed really lightweight stuff, and that's why MQTT was developed, and it's still being promoted as a nice lightweight thing with lightweight payloads. Now, it can take bigger payloads, but that's not how it's promoted. So MQTT is a transport. It's you're gonna hate this. It's sort of a competitor, if you will, to AMQP, which is promoted by. So MQTT is promoted by IBM, co-founder of that. AMQP is promoted by Microsoft, a member of the board of directors of the OPC Foundation. And then there's another one called DDS, and that's promoted. It really came from Real-Time Innovations, an embedded software company in Silicon Valley, part of the Industrial Internet Consortium, IIC. So DDS goes into there. Boy, that's an awful lot of letters. So OPC UA actually will go over, can be transported by MQTT, AMQP, or DDS. OPC UA is happy. OPC is a heavier payload, but it contains lots of information. So if you're in automation and you need all this device data, especially from robust devices, OPC UA is definitely the way to go. On lighter weight devices, then it gets to be, so you got your Venn diagram, and the Venn diagram is MQTT. The inventors have also come up with something now called Sparkplug, and Sparkplug can give something on your screen that looks an awful lot like a DD, if you're familiar with EDDL in HART or Foundation Field Bus, or I think it's called DTM if you're in the other world. In process instrumentation and so on. So they're trying to get a little bit more payload. Previously it didn't do metadata. Now they're trying to get some metadata in there so you have more useful information coming, which is really good, and they're really going to have to do that. So when Arlen Nipper was speaking from Cirrus Link, he was showing slides which basically showed replacing OPC UA with MQTT and Sparkplug, although he would say that he wasn't really trying to replace OPC UA, and it's true, he can't. I mean, realistically speaking, he's not going to totally replace all the interoperability, because basically he's not interoperable. Everything goes back through Cirrus Link. Everything is open. MQTT is open. Sparkplug is open as part of the Eclipse Foundation. But to really use it, you're going to have to buy something, and you buy it from Cirrus Link. So somewhere along the line, there's always something. So whatever. So OPC UA, So his point was in OPC UA the spec is ungodly long. I forget how many pages, 1,200 or something, a lot of pages. And so it was brought up when Tom Burke from OPC UA spoke, and he said, "Well, yeah, but who in the world builds something from the specification? Go buy it. It's the same deal, sort of. You can go to any one of a number of vendors competing in the open market and buy tools that you can then build your OPC UA clients and servers as well." So actually, an interesting part of the buy play was how am I going to get data into Ignition? And there's two ways, and they each have their purpose, and they each have their use. OPC UA is interoperable. It's built for interoperability, and it exists. It's all over the place. Everybody's using it. UA has taken the technology just leaps and bounds above the old COM and DCOM of the classic OPC. So it's really gone a lot, and the publish subscribe version of OPC UA is out. There are companies who have started building it into things. Ignition, by the way, builds OPC UA into its platform, just as it supports MQTT. They aren't fools either. Their job is to get data into their system. And so that was the interesting aspect to me, other than to learn how well inductive automation is doing, how the business just continues to grow. A lot of questions about what the competitors are doing, and people always ask me, and it's like, what I know is public knowledge. Well, mostly. And if it's not public knowledge, I don't talk about it. So anyway, so that's interesting stuff right now in this level of industrial software. And it was a really great conference. I love going to places where there's really smart people and we get into some really good geeky discussions. And there was that, just tons. It was fantastic. This week, tomorrow, I'm recording this on Monday, the 26th of September. On the 27th, I head to Phoenix, and I'll be spending a couple of days with the Profibus, Profinet people, learning a little more about that part of the networking of Internet of Things. And I'll be home a couple of weeks. I'll go to another small conference in Cincinnati the second week of October, and then I head to Dell World, and then I head to Emerson Exchange and skip a week, and then I go to Rockwell Automation's event. So that's my next 6 weeks worth of travel, and so I'll be reporting more on that. So the words of the day: MQTT, OPC UA, they're great. Go learn them, and take your OPC UA, or take your industrial software, build it to the next level. This podcast has been brought to you by Ignition from Inductive Automation, and this is Gary Mintchell. Not paid off by them, but I do appreciate the support. Gary needs to eat occasionally too. So thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you in my next recording.